did. It's who she is. So just a little bit on board over Cinnabar's face to know exactly.
Then there is his interaction with the Lunarians.
Bound up with the vitality or fertility of their high priest or king. Each episode, who is often the same person. They believe that
welcome to the Not Quite Daily Show. To use the unseen hand, though he does at times anyway, especially theatrical.
Everyone, and how embarrassing such an
admission. You don't need to know that second part in order to accept God, and people do vary. But basically, right back to trying to protect more freely as possible. This cosmos is the last page of our story.
This channel is abandoned, a wasteland. The original idea of a site like YouTube was just a place to share videos with the world. But nowadays, we think of it more like a million TV channels, 1,000 streams of content pushing across the waves and wires. And if you aren't pushing out that content, then it must mean you are off the air, that you are shut down for good. It's not just viewers who default to this. YouTube itself only wants you, only will reward you, if you behave like your own TV station in miniature. You must make your peace with that. Decide if it's something you even want. Otherwise, there is no point in moving forward. So, do I want to move forward? A month ago, we hit the 7th anniversary of my channel launching. So I think it's as good a time as any to announce that, of course I do. Hi. Been a minute. Sorry about that. This video is about announcing a return to regular YouTube content creation. But I don't feel like an announcement alone is sufficient. Outside of some sporadic releases covering Sunny Boy and RE0, I haven't made regular videos since I was nearly kicked off the platform back during The Promised Neverland. That was a long time ago, and is also when the chain of events began that led to the long YouTube drought, the other things I've done in the meantime, and how I have prepared to return. So I'm going to tell you about the upcoming videos, concrete plans, overview of changes for now and for later, and finally, share the rather personal series of crises and introspection that ultimately ended up with me, well, here again. Here again, but different. And since I think that is roughly the descending order of what people actually care about, it is the order of this video. Now then, the important stuff. 8 days from now, we'll see the release of the final video in my series covering each episode of Land of the Lustrous. Publishing that video also completes my long ago promise to finish the series before I did things like turning on ads or any of the other stuff that YouTubers do to try to sustain themselves. And maybe no one else remembers that promise or even cares, but I do. And while I was at it, I started work on another Land of the Lustrous video, which will release sometime in winter as I'm trying to time it to something else. Since the subject matter itself is something of a spoiler, I will leave it as a mystery for now. Ooh. It's something I thought might be easier to talk about separately from the episodic focus, and so, hey, more videos. Later this month, I have 2 videos lined up discussing RE0, which is returning for its 3rd season beginning October 2nd. One of those videos is basically the sequel to the remaining mysteries video I did before the 2nd season in 2020. The other is something a little different. A video focused entirely on character analysis of one character. And while that may seem like a rather limited scope, it's going to be one of the longest videos I've ever made, and might actually be the video I've spent the most time on out of everything I've done so far. Yes, even more than that 4-hour Made in Abyss finale. What was I thinking? It's a way to lead into our stream coverage of Season 3, which yes, we're doing that again, just like we did for Season 2. More details later on. And then, around the time the month rolls over and we begin the fall season, a new series of videos will begin, starting on the first Monday of the season, and continuing each following Monday, at least most of the time. We're going to be rather casual about it. You see, I figure one return deserves another, and so we will also see the return of Casual Monday, in a new, even more casual form. For the unaware, this was a format I tried out back in 2018, trying something different after the extensive weekly coverage of Drawing in the Franxx nearly killed me. Each Monday, I chose some of the ongoing seasonal anime to discuss in little video segments, much shorter, much less structured than the work that I had done to that point. More casual, you might say. Some works were discussed most weeks, some I dropped off on, and some were added later. In brief, it was a way to talk about more than a single show per season, and in a sustainable way. And while that remains the core idea behind Casual Monday and its return, it will have more going on this time around, but I'll go into more depth later. These are all the specific videos I have to announce right now, but I'm sure this prompts questions. Are these the only videos I've worked on? Will we get more episodic coverage like next week's finale for Land of the Lustrous? Why is Casual Monday suddenly back? And what about the content campaign? Whatever happened with that? Well, we're kind of moving from specific to general here, backwards from how you would normally do a video, so let's shift up to our next section. It's time to talk more broadly about the plans. So as mentioned, Casual Monday returns this next season, though I might talk a little about this current season, we'll see when we get there. Here is the important bit. Casual Monday is the core of my new approach to making YouTube content. That will sound like good news or bad news to different people, but let me explain. Briefly, there is a conflict between the kind of content I used to make and want to make, and the way that content interacts with the YouTube platform. I make long, high-effort video essays and analyses. YouTube wants regular uploads, ideally once a week or more. These goals are at cross purposes, especially for a solo operation, especially for someone with another job, and especially when I do more as Theta than make uploads for this one website. What's more, talking about only a single show during a season, or over multiple seasons, isn't the most ideal situation for me either. If only there was a way to eat my cake and still have it. Deliciously enough, there is. Casual Monday feeds the algorithm with weekly uploads, satisfies my own hunger for analyzing and discussing multiple shows, and yet still leaves room for dessert. And by dessert, I mean time to work on the longer, complicated flagship video essays that most excite me. A buffet of content opportunities to gorge myself upon. Great for the output of the channel, though terrible for my waistline. The metaphor may have gotten away from me there. The point is, some of the content I want to make takes me more than a week to do well. I don't want to do a substandard rush job to meet a quota just because that's what YouTube rewards, but neither do I want the channel and its long-term prospects to be harmed by not playing along. Thus, Casual Monday on the regular, other videos as it makes sense. Treating Casual Monday as a regular occurring program rather than a one-season experiment changes the possibilities as well. Yes, discussing ongoing seasonal anime is still the major feature, but as a weekly show, other kinds of segments also start to make sense. Say, a short segment on upcoming releases or streams, or relevant industry news. A place to discuss other storytelling things of interest as they happen, such as thoughts on a new film that I went to see and I feel is worth sharing. A place to highlight the work of other creators in this space, maybe even a place to collaborate with them at times. And as an ongoing show, there's the opportunity to add other things into the discussion, such as watching or rewatching an older series and making its episodes part of the focus from week to week, just as if it were currently airing. After all, it's not just YouTube that likes the idea of regular, predictable content releases. An ongoing overview of the previous week in anime each Monday is, quite frankly, the kind of thing I wish someone was making for me to consume. So that is the basic concept underpinning this new Casual Monday plan. What about everything else? The long-format video essays is still what I think of as the identity of this channel, so that continues to be a main priority. It's just that I now have the flexibility to spend more time on any given work, which changes the scope and complexity I can aim for. It expands the variety of topics I can approach as well. Heck, I can even sometimes make short videos. Because of this, though, it means some irregularity when such things would release. For example, it makes sense to release the upcoming RE0 videos just before the new season begins, rather than as soon as they were complete. It will also make sense to create multiple videos around a similar topic and release them closer together, which may mean releasing nothing else in the meantime. And it may happen that something comes up where I want to push other plans aside and make a video about whatever is occurring or airing right that moment, and that's the kind of flexibility that I've really wanted all along. Which leads to answering an obvious question. What about the long-form, week-to-week, episode-by-episode coverage of currently airing shows? This is actually what most of the content on this channel consists of right now, though my coverage of Darling on the Franxx was the only time it actually went off as planned. which is to say that I already have a lot of experience with that idea, and its upsides, and its pitfalls. So I reached this conclusion. You can do it, it's possible, but only if you give up on doing anything else. Making a video for each episode, to the extent and granularity that I like, and doing so within the limited window before a new episode premieres, it's an oppressive list of demands. It's hard to work anything else in, and therefore quite limiting. For example, if I had followed up my coverage of Darling in the Franxx by covering, say, Banana Fish the following seasons, then I would have had an anime-focused YouTube channel that went an entire year and only talked about 2 shows. Leaving aside how constricting that may feel for me, what if you in the audience didn't like either one of those works, and I go a whole 12 months with around 50 videos and not one of them holds any interest for you? So, the short answer is that I don't think that will return in the same way. The longer answer is that it's not the end of making videos that go episode by episode through a series, because I've already done some work on another series with that intent, nor is it the end of putting a lot of focus on a currently airing series week to week, because we've done that on Twitch these past years in a variety of formats, often covering multiple series. But with current plans and capabilities, that is not going to be the core focus of the channel going forward. And now that I've brought up Twitch, let's talk about that for a bit. I understand fully that some of you never have and never intend to venture over there. It's a different platform, live content is different than edited, it's another hurdle to watch something at a very specific time or all at once, and although about 6 to 8 times as many of my viewers will watch that content as videos on demand instead of as live streams, Twitch does not have a very good experience in store for those who are trying to peruse past broadcasts. Despite that, Twitch still figures heavily into my plans. Since I began, we've gone episodically through 22 seasons of various series, had another 41 broadcasts focused on current anime, but within 1 or 2 streams, and have covered 29 anime films. I've even played fully through 12 games and had a half-dozen scattered streams on some others. And the one thing I have kept consistent without fail is that every season has the preview show, an overview of most of the new anime each 3 months, with short explanation of premise, selected footage, and some initial thoughts. We've done that for 21 seasons in a row now, over 5 years. And, as it happens, something like that was actually the first content on this channel, though I have long since taken down those videos. It's one of the main things I wanted to do from the beginning, and have actually succeeded in doing so on Twitch. So with that little overview, I hope you can understand that Twitch and live content are important to me, and they are not going anywhere. And it's not only because of how much we can cover. One of the more frustrating things for me when I only had YouTube content was the difficulty in interacting with viewers and their opinions and their insights. The YouTube comment section just isn't set up for that kind of conversation. I am never going to have all the answers, or the most correct take, or noticed every detail or interpretation. And interacting with other people interested in that deeper dive of media, it doesn't just make for a more well-rounded analysis for the experience of the audience, it helps challenge me and extend my own understanding. That, of course, is what we get from live stream discussions, at the cost of brevity. Though, let's be honest, brevity has never been a high priority around here. But this is not the only upside. Just as I improved the videos on this channel over time, so too did I slowly go from terrible at live streaming to sorta okay at it. This is a skill set I wanted to refine, but for more than just streaming. Watching a new episode on air and having to immediately hold forth on it, highlight meanings and patterns, and remember on the fly how they integrate with earlier parts of a work, and to articulate all of that while fielding comments and building off of them, well, that kind of thing only improves with practice. And at this point, I've had a lot of practice. Over 650 streams and 1,730 hours of being live on air. All that practice is useful in other ways. Say, when joining other creators for collaboration, or in an unscripted format like a podcast. Having to immediately process a story is also practicing rapid analysis, something that I hope will serve me well for the Casual Monday videos, where I will need to write analyses almost every day. In the same way someone might take improv classes to improve their public speaking, doing hundreds of live streams will help improve my YouTube content and other possible opportunities as they come up. Now, as to the plans for the Twitch channel, its final advantage is the flexibility inherent in live content, and that will be reflected in what happens over there. The preview shows will continue. They are usually the second or third Sunday of each new season. A couple weeks ago, we finished our Summer Film Festival, something we did last year as well, where we pivot a bit to focus on anime movies over a couple of packed weekends, with entries selected through a combination of voting and raffles. It's a good chance then that we're going to keep that up each summer. In the fall, as mentioned, we'll be covering the third season of RE0 in a similar manner to how we covered the second. A little pre-episode discussion, watching the newest episode together, and then some time discussing and analyzing it. Like last time, we'll also have a second broadcast that is only discussion, broadcast in the prime time for the Americas. That will begin on October 2nd and continue each Wednesday when the new episodes release. Much as with the earlier YouTube section, these are the plans with specific dates, but are by no means the end of things for which I've already prepared. For example, one of our perennial favorites on Twitch is what I call Viewer's Choice, where someone in the audience gets to choose one of the current anime for its own stream, and they can supply a focus for my analysis and the resulting discussion if they so wish. I actually hope to make it a habit to turn some of these selections into their own YouTube videos over time. We will continue that tradition, but those are often chosen to help fill up the calendar, and thus have no set dates or even any set frequency. There will also be at times streams that are outside the norm, either things done just for fun or in a unique way, just for a change of pace. For example, back when Amazon's Watch Party still worked with Twitch, we spent one of my anniversary streams just watching James May, Our Man in Japan, together. I've also done a couple of game show streams where I doff my best host persona and we have some sort of contest relevant to current anime. I have plans for another one of those already, though I first need to lose the rest of my depression weight so that I can fit back into my suit. We've also played some video games on Twitch. Not a main focus for me, even though it's a main focus for the platform itself, but like many of you, I do enjoy games, and it's fun to share that experience at times. Such as how hilariously bad I was in my first Elden Ring session. Most of what we've played, though, was in service of a bigger idea, the indefinitely delayed content campaign. Through a mix of my own choices and audience input, we've played through a dozen games that are cyberpunk or adjacent as a way to begin coverage of that genre. The actual YouTube and other Twitch content for that idea are yet to come. In the last section of this video, I'll share how things kind of went sideways for me, why that interrupted the original plans, but I'll share the tentative overview with you now. I do intend to complete that idea, but rather than run it as a single 7-month sprint, I've been breaking it up into smaller sections, which we'll just release periodically. For example, film noir has a lot of influence on cyberpunk, and so there will be a whole film noir section we run over a couple of months, with a break before we get to whatever the next section will be. I don't want to overburden this video with too many specifics, but most of what was intended from before is still the plan in terms of the works we will discuss. I've picked out a few to add on as well. There's also new developments in the world that I think warrant their own examination. The time since 2020, when I originally planned to begin, has seen the rise of powerful AI art tools and the resulting controversy, the mainstream popularity of VTubers, widespread coverage of drone warfare in Ukraine, ChatGPT and adjacent tools, NFTs and other virtual goods like Facebook's attempt at its metaverse, and all the upheaval and debate over government control that played out during COVID. These are all things which are awfully on theme for a discussion of cyberpunk and its ideas, and would not have been included in the originally planned discussions. On the one hand, then, the delay has this upside, that the world around us has provided more examples as to why that genre still has relevance. On the other hand, cyberpunk isn't really the kind of genre you want to see come to life. So, that overview is one of the big changes to my plans. Alongside the Casual Mondays bit, that constitutes the major reshuffling that I think most people will care about. There's some more kind of smaller things, so I've put them into their own little section detailing the changes. The release of next week's Land of the Lustrous video, I guess, officially marks the advent of Nearly on Red 2.0, where I will be deploying a number of aesthetic and structural changes to the way I make videos, some of which show up in this one, sort of. It's kind of a soft rebranding, you might say. I'm sure that sort of thing is secondary in appeal to the actual analysis content, but I'm always interested in improving every aspect of my work. And selfishly, this sort of thing excites me, and it's something I just really like to brainstorm and mess with. More pragmatically, my inner artist really needs that kind of output to stay engaged with the work as a whole, or to avoid burning out, which is one of many things I've learned about myself during this hiatus. More on that hiatus later. I will say at least that it's not a mere coat of paint. Something we discuss frequently when dealing with a visual medium like anime is the way in which what is on screen supports the elements of story, whether tonal or thematic, or a way to infuse tension, whatever the intended result may be. Framing a scene to exaggerate distance between two characters can be a way to communicate or to foreshadow a separation. Using a dark, moody color palette can be a way to suggest foreboding events or inner turmoil, and so on. I believe that if I'm going to make a video instead of, say, a podcast, then the visual space needs to support the elements of my analysis in a similar way. Displaying actual footage is an obvious use, of course, but I think a lot can be done with non-content elements. I tend to make long, complicated videos with many subsections, often referring back across earlier parts, or even having similar sections between videos on the same subject. Presenting that structure in a clear and consistent way aids clarity and takes some of the effort out of following along the longer work. Like, there's a reason that books have chapter and page numbers, right? I am also very spoiler conscious and try my best to never be the source of an unexpected spoiler. Having a clear and consistent way to label anything spoilery under discussion is thus important to me. This will be especially critical for Casual Monday, where we might discuss a dozen different series in the same video, and people might understandably be skipping around to the sections which are relevant to their interests. There is also often a need to label an on-screen element, provide a credit, bibliographical information, and consistency in that sort of thing is simply responsible. Now, those are mostly practicalities, aids for the viewer. There is also the matter of branding and aesthetics and visual interest that are part of the audiovisual package. In theory, only the substance of the analysis content has value and is worthwhile or worthless, regardless of the packaging. In reality, we will subconsciously attribute more validity and authority to a polished presentation and devalue productions which seem lower effort. Many of the things I've put on screen have been ad hoc, something I came up with because I needed something, and, as the saying goes, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary solution. Taking the time to think those elements out, and have something I like and something I want to utilize, well, that's part of what I've been doing with all this time away. Those changes will also propagate to the stream presentations and eventually to the website, though that is the last priority. The website will undergo some big changes as well to help support some complicated future plans, but that is beyond the scope of this video and will have to remain a mystery for now. Ooh. There's also some behind-the-scenes changes which won't be evident just yet, but will start showing up with Casual Monday. To keep that show on the air consistently, I will occasionally need to make at least part of my videos away from the studio space, and I have been slowly building up the means to do so. And then, with the release of the last Land of the Lustrous episode, I will finally allow myself to monetize all this effort. I've released over 100 videos on YouTube, but have never run ads owing to a long ago promise. I don't really like them myself, but I have little doubt that YouTube will privilege videos which earn them ad revenue over those which do not. I'm hoping they will let me get away with just sticking one ad all the way at the end, but I confess I'm a bit ignorant about how all that works. So that will be a change, but not the real change in terms of monetization. Most YouTubers rely on other means to stay afloat, with video sponsorships and Patreon being some of the most prevalent. Patreon is not in the short-term plans, and I don't really like video sponsorships. Maybe it would suit Casual Monday, but I hate the idea of inserting some kind of ad segment into my video essays. And by hate, I mean I won't do it. I've thus tried to get creative with other means. I'm not ready to share those details today, but expect that to start showing up in the coming months to half year or so. I think you'll find it suits me and how I have done things to this point. Now, technically the Twitch channel is monetized, as that's just kind of how Twitch works, but it is hardly a means to support oneself. If you think I've been streaming over there and absent here because of financial reasons, then let me disabuse you of that notion. There was a leak some time back of payouts to various creators on Twitch, and apparently you can find me somewhere on that list. If you bother to do so, you might find it a tad underwhelming compared to what you expected. Nevertheless, the support there has been critical in keeping me going, so if that's you, thank you. The money we raise towards the content campaign will also eventually bear fruit, and I apologize that it did not stick to the original schedule. Things just fell apart, which is the real reason I've been absentee and why I've been careful about coming back. It goes against my nature to do so, but for the last part of this video, I am going to explain the Crises. By the way, there is no more information about the future of the channel from here on out, so if you don't care about my personal upheavals and how it interfered with being Theta, then you can go ahead and safely bow out. In fact, I won't mind if you do so, as frankly I'm uncomfortable sharing the things I'm about to share, and the less witnesses the better. Longtime viewers of here or Twitch will know this already, but I'm a very private person. The name and location and biographical details of the alter ego are hidden, and I hope they always will be. Unless it's somehow relevant to whatever we discuss, I default to sharing nothing about my life or even many of my opinions. This isn't a change in policy then. Rather, suddenly those details are relevant because they explain why my YouTube output seemingly fell off a cliff. So, brief history. I started on Twitch in the summer of 2019. I did so because I very nearly lost this channel earlier that year when Sony double-striked me over a 16-second clip of The Promised Neverland. I didn't want to have all my eggs in the same basket, and so spent some months building up a presence on Twitch, which naturally led to building up a Discord presence as well. The intent was to focus my energy there for a time, and then return to YouTube the next year while keeping the Twitch segment alongside. That next year was 2020. I feel like I probably don't need to explain that 2020 was a rather chaotic and stressful year. While I plunged ahead with quitting my day job, preparing for the content campaign, building out this stage, and otherwise behaving as though things were going to plan, somewhere deep inside, a crisis was building. For starters, I took COVID extremely seriously. A lot of my family are in medicine, and I have been following the lockdowns in China since January. Realizing that some of the initial symptoms were clearly neurological in nature was frightening to me. Thus, when quarantine began in March, I proceeded to stay in my house for 70 days straight, and very rarely ventured out afterwards. My car actually died from disuse during this period. I'm an introvert, and I think some part of me was kind of elated during the first weeks, especially combined with quitting my very people-facing job. But prolonged isolation is not great for one's mental state. A housemate and some online contact was not filling this need to the degree that I assumed, and thus I started in something of a mental fortitude deficit before 2020's shenanigans really got rolling. COVID did not dissipate easily, and the measures employed towards that end caused some friction. While I would personally mask up everywhere I went for the following 3 years, there was a number of my fellow citizens who would go to great lengths to avoid doing so. To me, a surprising amount, a shocking and devastating amount. I realized that for an enormous number of people, all that was required to not care about others was to be mildly inconvenienced. This had terrible implications to my mind, which I'll come back to in just a moment. In the US, 2020 was an election year, with all the contention and hysteria usually involved turned up to 11. The George Floyd murder kicked off protests and heated counter-protests nationwide, and in aggregate, it seemed to me that my countrymen, those most like me, were all too willing to tear out each other's throats. And there I was, isolated and anxious, powerless to do anything but look on, worried over my medical family members who had to be on the front lines over and over. This was a rough time for a lot of people, all right? Others had it worse, but I had a personal crisis kick off as a result. And to explain why, I'll have to overshare more than I have ever wanted. Something really personal. So, here goes. I always wanted to be a father. I love my father. He had many great qualities, did many things well, but there's a lot that went wrong in my childhood, which I will skip over. We don't need to get that personal. It will suffice to say that as a result, I was determined to be a good dad in a way that he couldn't be. And this formed a big part of my identity, of my purpose. I constantly thought about what elements make up a good father figure. I intentionally worked on my empathy, on my understanding of children, of psychology. I fussed about my health, and I avoided any career path that I thought would lead to me being an absentee parent. It mattered to me. It's what I wanted. And there, in the midst of 2020's chaos, I realized I didn't want to bring a child into that world. I thought that if we couldn't come together to do the small things asked of us for something as visible as the COVID pandemic, then there is probably no chance of us sacrificing far more for the nebulous abstraction of climate change. You know, none of us consents to existence. Our parents made that choice for us, and I couldn't decide for someone else to bring them into a world that I was losing faith in. And I realize this is not the only way to be a father, okay? It's just how I had long imagined my future playing out. Like, the other details of my life didn't matter so much as long as I had this. And so I felt bereft. You know, some people in our Discord sometimes give me grief about my dad energy. And I protest because it seems like a roundabout way of calling me old and out of touch. But I guess there's a small part of me that doesn't mind so much. Anyway, the result of all this turmoil was me being completely unable to write anymore. The content campaign was bearing down, and I spent day after day working on it, and nothing. I couldn't do it. It was like I'd had a stroke that removed that part of my brain from functioning. We even started it, and I had this terrible stream which made it plain to me that I was unwell. So I postponed it, just after making all this fuss about starting up, explaining it, all these videos, all this other stuff. All that immediately made me look incompetent and untrustworthy. I thought then we'd try again at the end of the year, because one of the things I imagined as a centerpiece was about to release. The game Cyberpunk 2077. If you missed it somehow, that also didn't go well. I did try streaming it, with mixed results, but it wasn't what I had counted on it being, and the community backlash and the venom poured more than a little cold water over my forced enthusiasm. And then, on the last day of the year, 2020 had a final middle finger for me. My little shop cat was killed, horribly, and in a way that made me feel responsible. Intellectually, I know it wasn't my fault, but if I'd done some things differently, she wouldn't have died, scared and alone. And after I found her, I didn't stream Cyberpunk 2077 anymore. Everything seemed pointless and doomed to failure. And I think if I hadn't had the second half of RE0 Season 2 to just throw myself into, I might not have done any of this again. But I kept on, and I started to hope that as long as I kept some kind of fire going long enough, I might find my way back. But that road was rockier than expected. 3 different family members would have cancer during the next 2 years and go through all that treatment hell. I would have my own scare, a worry that wasn't put to rest until about 6 months ago. And perhaps prompted by all the things happening in the world and at home, my siblings and I would be forced to unpack some shared trauma, though that's all I'll say there. I did release a few things here and there, as I mentioned, but every one of those videos felt suffocating, an enormous task. I could stream well enough, content that was live, in the present, over when the camera stopped, but trying to write something to later record and even later edit, all that commitment to the future, it felt impossible. And I wondered how I had ever done it. And throughout all this, people would understandably ask me about things. When are you coming back to YouTube? Are you going to make this video or that one? Will you talk about this show? Sometimes even accusations of what I must be doing instead. And how was I to answer any of them? I didn't know the answer myself. And a lot of the things I'm laying out right now were not things I understood while in the thick of it. I'm better now, by the way. Sorry. Some things have even improved. For example, in the last few years, they've finally developed a class of drugs that works on my type of insomnia, and we found one that mostly works for me in the last 2 months. And that exposed other possible things that might be treatable. In fact, tomorrow, the day after this releases, I'm going to be tested for sleep apnea overnight and narcolepsy the day afterwards, because yes, apparently you can have both insomnia and narcolepsy. More importantly, those 2 things are a lot more treatable than primary insomnia, and if either or both are part of my issue, in a month or so, I might be functioning something like a normal human being for the first time in my life. Imagine the possibilities. So, for all that has not gone as hoped in the past 4 years, it's not all bad, it's not all lost. Sometimes setbacks can be an opportunity to grow a little wiser, to grow a little more kind. And certainly, I haven't had anything happen as catastrophic as those living in the various war zones in the world. I'm not actually fighting or dying of cancer. I couldn't do all this. And now, I want to believe that I can. And in 8 days' time, I guess we'll find out. Good to see you again, everyone. Thanks for everything. Here's to being back. I'm going to be cleaning up glitter for weeks.